gonna be a different year. This is not the place for fear. I've got a job to do.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Thursday. Today is March 4th, and as you can see by the board behind me, today we're going to begin reading Harry Potter, Chapter 2, and we're going to be doing another set of notes, and that's what it says right here in the message. So if I scroll down and I go to our Do Now and get right into it, you can see all I want you to do is write down tonight's homework. Tonight's homework, and this is the assignment that we're going to work on today, is to read Chapter 2 and complete a set of notes of your choice. And this is going to be done on notebook page 45. So today, you guys are going to have the opportunity to choose your own note-taking strategy, and you guys are going to have an opportunity to pick whichever ones that you want to do for Chapter 2. If I scroll through our table of contents, and I scroll all the way down to our Unit 3 section, you can see here today we are going to be adding page 45, and it's going to be the Chapter 2 notes. And you're going to see this pattern over and over. You're going to see we're going to do Chapter 1 notes, then we did a Chapter 1 summary, and now we're moving on to Chapter 2 notes, and then it will be a Chapter 2 summary, and that pattern will repeat over and over throughout this entire book. Make sure that we're not skipping any pages. And we always want to make sure, too, that we set this up that our notes are on the left-hand side of our notebook, and then our summary can go on the right, so that I can see all of Chapter 2's information right here. You can see here are my Chapter 2 notes, and then here is my Chapter 2 summary. So it's all together. And here is my information from Chapter 1. My Chapter 1 notes are here. My Chapter 1 summary is there. So when I open up to my notebook, I can see everything that I need for that one chapter all in one area. Okay, so let's scroll right down in and let's get into it. Here we have Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This is Chapter 2, known as Dobby's Warning. At the end of Chapter 1, Harry goes into his room to spend his birthday all alone, pretending not to exist, but something is on his bed, and we're going to learn that something has a name, and its name is Dobby. So, just to review, guys, you remember you're always going to complete these three things with every single chapter: your notes, your summary, and your quiz. And today, we're going to focus on those notes. So here are the directions for you guys. First, today, you're going to have the opportunity to choose what type of notes you want to complete for Chapter 2. So, go to page 42 in your notebook and choose what type of notes you will try. So here, I have to go to page 42 in my notebook. Let's open up the document camera. All right, and right here you can see I have to go to my note-taking strategies page. And I'm going to look around here and I'm going to decide what note-taking strategy I want to try. All right, do I want to try a list? And you'll see that's what I chose. Post-it notes, a T-chart, a timeline, Cornell notes. Which is the style that you want to pick? So, everybody, pick whichever one you want. Again, I would encourage you to, the Venn diagram, it's not going to be a good one right now because there's really nothing to compare and contrast. Same with the T-chart. I'm not sure that this one will work great, but Cornell notes, again, would certainly be good. A web. To write just a summary, if you're going to choose this one, you can know that Cornell notes is kind of like a combination of summaries and lists together, along with a summary at the bottom, but you could choose just to try to write a good summary. But I like, when I'm writing summaries, I always like to have some kind of way to jot down my thoughts and ideas as I'm reading. In years past, I've actually seen kids say they're going to do a combo, and they chose to, say, Post-its and summarizing, and they would combo those together, okay? Or they would like to do a web and combine webs and summaries. So in years past, kids have found creative ways to do the note-taking strategies that they like best, but also making sure that they're coming to class prepared to do things like best question and the 45-second summary challenge. So right now, everybody pick which kind of note-taking strategy you want to do. Once you have it, once you've picked it out, you're going to go to page 45 in your notebook, and you're going to begin setting up your notes with the date, the title, and the page number. Remember, our notes are always going to be on the left-hand side of our notebook with our summaries on the right. Okay, so here, I'm setting up my notebook page. And you can see I've already completed my notes, and I chose to do a list for Chapter 2. But let's look at just the way that we're going to set up our notes. All right, so today's date is March 4th. The title is Chapter 2 Notes. This is Dobby's Warning. We're always going to be making sure we include the chapter names on each one of these pages. So this is Chapter 2 Notes, and this is about Dobby's Warning, and it's page 45. Now, if you were doing a web, your title would not be at the top. It would be in the middle. Or if you were doing, a web, just a web, your title would be in the middle. Okay, if you're doing Cornell notes, you are going to have to set up your Cornell notes with your big I, and you have your section for questions, section for notes, and a section for your summary. Okay, so if you're doing notes like that. If you're doing a timeline, okay, you can see how I set my notebook up. I did it here with the title at the top and the page number, but then I turned my notebook on its side and I did my timeline going across. All right, and then that way at the end, when I got to the end of my row, I could just come back around and start with the next event here. So this is events 1 through 4, and then this is 5, 6, 7, 8, and then this is 9 through 14. So if you want to, you do a timeline. This is, I think, the best way, turning your notebook right on its side, okay, for a timeline. But everybody right now needs to do what they need to do in order to set up their notes. Again, if you're doing a list, that's just your title, your page number, and then your date. Okay, if you're doing something like Cornell notes, I'm going to have to take time to set that up, all right, for myself. Okay, so now I'm turning back to my page that I chose to do for Chapter 2. And I have it all set up right there. And so now I'm ready to read. So let's remind ourselves where we left off. At the end of Chapter 1, it was Harry's birthday. We know that he's living with the Dursleys, who really hate Harry and hate magic. And Harry has to spend his birthday alone in his bedroom, pretending not to exist, while the Dursleys are having a dinner party downstairs with this great food, and the couple that comes over named the Masons. And when Harry goes into his bedroom, something is already there on his bed. And that's where we find Harry right now at the start of Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Dobby's Warning. Harry managed not to shout out, but it was a close thing. The little creature on the bed had large bat-like ears and bulging green eyes the size of tennis balls. Harry knew instantly that this was what had been watching him out of the garden hedge earlier that morning. As they stared at each other, Harry heard Dudley's voice from the hall. "May I take your coats, Mr. and Mrs. Mason?" The creature slipped off the bed and bowed so low that the end of its long, thin nose touched the carpet. Harry noticed that it was wearing what looked like an old pillowcase with rips for arms and leg holes. Hello," said Harry nervously. "Harry Potter," said the creature in a high-pitched voice Harry was sure would carry down the stairs. "So long has Dobby wanted to meet you, sir. Such an honor it is." Thank you," said Harry, edging along the wall and sinking into his desk chair, next to Hedwig, who was asleep in her large cage. He wanted to ask, "What are you?" but thought it would sound too rude, so instead he said, "Who are you?" "Dobby, sir. Just Dobby. Dobby the house elf," said the creature. "Oh, really?" said Harry. I don't want to be rude or anything, but this isn't a great time for me to have a house elf in my bedroom." Aunt Petunia's high false laugh sounded from the living room. The elf hung his head. "Not that I'm not pleased to meet you," said Harry quickly, "but, is there any particular reason that you're here?" "Oh, yes, sir," said Dobby earnestly. "Dobby has come to tell you, sir. It is difficult, sir. Dobby wonders where to begin." "Sit down," said Harry politely, pointing at the bed. To his horror, The elf burst into tears, very noisy tears. "Sit down," he wailed. "Never, never, ever." Harry thought he heard the voices downstairs falter. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to offend you or anything." "Offend, Dobby?" choked the elf. "Dobby has never been asked to sit down by a wizard like an equal." Now, this would be a good place for us to stop. I've already read about 2 pages, and you should be adding something to your notes. All right, and again, you can see I've got just a couple of bullets as I am going right along. I'm describing what is happening. In yours, whether you're doing Cornell notes, a web, okay, you might write something down about who Dobby is, what Dobby is, what's happening. Okay, in my notes you can see there's a little creature on Harry's bed with large bat-like ears and bulging green eyes the size of tennis balls. Harry realizes this must be the creature he saw earlier, and Harry invites Dobby to sit down, and he bursts into tears. And I wrote down Dobby has never been asked to be sit down by a wizard. And you can see with my bullets, I'm writing down very specific, lots of them. There are times that I will do this and every event gets written down, most often when I type them. But when I'm handwriting notes like this, I would never try to write down everything like I'm doing here. If I was handwriting, again, I would probably pick anywhere between 10 to 15 different things that I think are the most important, and I'd put them in my own words. All right. So let's continue reading here on page 16. Harry, trying to say shh and look comforting, at the same time ushered Dobby back onto the bed, where he sat hiccuping, looking like a large and very ugly doll. At last he managed to control himself and sat with his great eyes fixed on Harry in an expression of watery adoration. "You can't have met many decent wizards," said Harry, trying to cheer him up. Dobby shook his head. Then, without warning, he leapt up and started banging his head furiously on the window, shouting, "Bad Dobby! Bad Dobby!" "Don't! What are you doing?" Harry hissed, springing up and pulling Dobby back onto the bed. Hedwig had woken up with a particularly loud screech and was beating her wings wildly against the bars of her cage. "Dobby had to punish himself, sir," said the elf, who had gone slightly cross-eyed. "Dobby almost spoke ill of his family, sir." "Your family?" "The wizard family Dobby serves, sir. Dobby is a house elf, bound to serve one house and one family forever." "Do they know you're here?" asked Harry curiously. Dobby shuddered. "Oh, no, sir, no. Dobby will have to punish himself most grievously for coming to see you, sir. Dobby will have to shut his ears in the oven door for this. If they ever knew, sir." "But won't they notice if you shut your ears in the oven door?" "Dobby doubts it, sir. Dobby is always having to punish himself for something, sir. They lets Dobby get on with it, sir. Sometimes they reminds me to do extra punishments." "But why don't you leave? Escape?" "A house elf must be set free, sir, and the family will never set Dobby free. Dobby will serve the family until he dies, sir." Harry stared. "And I thought I had it bad staying here for another 4 weeks," he said. "This makes the Dursleys sound almost human." "Can't anyone help you? Can't I?" Almost at once, Harry wished he hadn't spoken. Dobby dissolved again into wails of gratitude. "Please," Harry whispered frantically, "please be quiet. If the Dursleys hear anything, if they know you're here." "Harry Potter asks if he can help Dobby. Dobby has heard of your greatness, sir, but of your goodness Dobby never knew." Harry, who was feeling distinctly hot in the face, said, "Whatever you've heard about my greatness is a load of rubbish. I'm not even top of my year at Hogwarts. That's Hermione. But he stopped quickly, because thinking about Hermione was painful. "Harry Potter is humble and modest," said Dobby reverently, his orb-like eyes aglow. Harry Potter speaks not of his triumph over he who must not be named. Voldemort? Said Harry. Dobby clapped his hands over his bat-like ears and moaned, Ah! Speak not his name, sir! Speak not the name! Sorry, said Harry quickly. I know lots of people don't like it. My friend Ron... He stopped again. Thinking about Ron was painful too. Dobby leaned toward Harry, his eyes wide as headlights. Dobby heard tell, sir, he said hoarsely, that Harry Potter met the Dark Lord for a second time just weeks ago. That Harry Potter escaped yet again. Now here Dobby is, of course, referencing the first book, the last year at Hogwarts when Harry defeated Voldemort for a second time. This is a good time that, again, you guys could stop, write a note down if you've not already written a note down. If you're doing Cornell notes, again, be sure that as you guys are doing them, you might want to dabble your or sprinkle your questions throughout as you're reading. Okay, a level 1 question might be something like, who is Dobby? A level 2 question, though, might be something like, if you were Harry, what would you do about Dobby? You have this house elf making a lot of noise in your bedroom when you're supposed to be in there making no noise at all and pretending you don't exist. So we could ask a level 2 question, something like, if you were Harry, how would you deal with Dobby? And so I can pull my paper down, and you can see some of the things that I wrote there. Alright, and we're getting down to this point here where Dobby's finally going to get to the point of why he is there. And we know the name of this chapter is Dobby's Warning. Alright, I am at the very bottom of page 18. Actually, no, I'm at the top of page 19. Harry nodded, and Dobby's eyes suddenly shone with tears. Ah, sir, he gasped, dabbing his face with a corner of the grubby pillowcase he was wearing. Harry Potter is valiant and bold. He has braved so many dangers already. But Dobby has come to protect Harry Potter, to warn him, even if he does have to shut his ears in the oven door later. Harry Potter must not go back to Hogwarts. So here we know very clearly what Dobby's warning is. So it would be very important in notes. We would want to stop and make sure that we write down this is Dobby's warning. Dobby is there to warn Harry not to go back to Hogwarts. Once again, if you're asking questions, we could answer or we could ask many level 2 and level 3 questions with this idea. Should Harry listen to Dobby? If you were Harry, would you listen to Dobby and not go back to Hogwarts? What would you do if you were Harry and you were in his shoes? How would you feel about this warning of not going back to Hogwarts? Dobby is going to have to shut his ears in the oven later just to bring Harry this warning. So you know that Dobby truly thinks that there is something that is going to happen and Harry should not go back to Hogwarts. So again, if you're Harry, what and how do you feel about this warning that Dobby is bringing you? Okay, I'm right in the middle of page 19. Harry Potter must not go back to Hogwarts. There was a silence broken only by the chink of knives and forks from downstairs and the distant rumble of Uncle Vernon's voice. Remember, they're having a dinner party downstairs. What? Harry stammered. But I've got to go back. Term starts on September 1st. It's all that's keeping me going. You don't know what it's like here. I don't belong here. I belong in your world, at Hogwarts. This is a good time. Here, we seem to be stopping a lot on page 19. But to point out our references to the hero's journey. Harry himself is telling Dobby, I don't fit in here. I don't belong here. I belong in your world. I don't belong here in this world with the Dursleys. I don't fit in. I lead this awful, boring life where now I'm stuck in my bedroom and they're having parties downstairs. And so here, this is a lot of evidence about how Harry does not fit in that ordinary world. The wizarding world is really where he feels at home. I don't belong here. I belong in your world, at Hogwarts. No, 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 squeaked Dobby, shaking his head so hard his ears flapped. Harry Potter must stay where he is safe. He is too great, too good to lose. If Harry Potter goes back to Hogwarts, he will be in mortal danger. That means his life will be in danger. Why? Said Harry in surprise. There is a plot, Harry Potter, a plot to make most terrible things happen at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry this year, whispered Dobby, suddenly trembling all over. Dobby has known it for months, sir. Harry Potter must not put himself in peril. He is too important, sir. So here, Dobby, in our notes, Dobby is revealing that there is a plan to make terrible things happen at Hogwarts this year. What terrible things? Said Harry at once. Who is plotting them? Dobby made a funny choking noise and then banged his head frantically against the wall. All right, cried Harry, grabbing the elf's arm to stop him. I get it. You can't tell me. I understand. But why are you warning me? A sudden unpleasant thought struck him. Hang on. This hasn't got anything to do with Sorry, you know who has it? You could just shake or nod, he added hastily as Dobby's head tilted worryingly close to the wall again. Slowly Dobby shook his head. Not he who must not be named, sir? But Dobby's eyes were wide, and he seemed to be trying to give Harry a hint. Harry, however, was completely lost. He hasn't got a brother, has he? Dobby shook his head, his eyes wider than ever. Well then, I can't think who else would have a chance of making horrible things happen at Hogwarts, said Harry. I mean, there's Dumbledore for one thing. You know who Dumbledore is, don't you? Dobby bowed his head. Albus Dumbledore is the greatest headmaster Hogwarts has ever had. Dobby knows it, sir. Dobby has heard Dumbledore's powers rival those of he who must not be named. At the height of his strength, sir. Dobby's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. There are powers Dumbledore doesn't. Powers that no decent wizard. And before Harry could stop him, Dobby bounded off the bed, seized Harry's desk lamp, and started beating himself around the head with ear-splitting yelps. A sudden silence fell downstairs. 2 seconds later, Harry, heart-thudding madly, heard Uncle Vernon coming into the hall, calling, Dudley must have left his television on again, the little tyke. Quick, in the closet, Harry hissed, stuffing Dobby in, shutting the door, and flinging himself onto the bed just as the door handle turned. What the devil are you doing? Said Uncle Vernon through gritted teeth, his face horribly close to Harry's. You've just ruined the punchline of my Japanese golfer joke. One more sound and you'll wish you'd never been born, boy. He stomped flat-footed from the room. Shaking, Harry let Dobby out of the closet. See what it's like here? He said. See why I've got to go back to Hogwarts? It's the only place I've got. Well, I think I've got friends. Friends who don't even write to Harry Potter, said Dobby slyly. Well, I expect they've just been... Hey, wait a minute, said Harry, frowning. How do you know my friends haven't been writing to me? Dobby shuffled his feet. Harry Potter mustn't be angry with Dobby. Dobby did it for the best. Have you been stopping my letters? Dobby has them here, sir, said the elf, stepping nimbly out of Harry's reach. He pulled a thick wad of envelopes from the inside of the pillowcase he was wearing. Harry could make out Hermione's neat writing, Ron's untidy scrawl, and even a scribble that looked as though it was from the Hogwarts gamekeeper Hagrid. Dobby blinked anxiously up at Harry. Harry Potter mustn't be angry. Dobby hoped if Harry Potter thought his friends had forgotten him, Harry Potter might not want to go back to school, sir. Harry wasn't listening. He made a grab for the letters, but Dobby jumped out of reach. Harry Potter will have them, sir, if he gives Dobby his word that he will not return to Hogwarts. Ah, sir, this is a danger you must not face. Say that you won't go back, sir. No, said Harry angrily. Give me my friend's letters. Now again, if you've not written anything down in your notes, you should stop here and Dobby and write notes down about what is going on here between Dobby and Harry. We know, you can see here in my notes, Harry discovers that it was Dobby that was stopping all of his letters. Dobby is trying to convince Harry not to go back to Hogwarts. I included the detail about Uncle Vernon coming in. Now, again, we could ask a really good level 2 question. Here, again, how do you think Harry should deal with Dobby? What should he do? I mean, we would never advocate for lying, but should Harry just tell Dobby, fine, Dobby, I won't go back to Hogwarts, and then just go back anyway? Would Dobby go away if Harry said that? Again, we can talk, and again, when we play Best Question, and you guys get a chance to ask questions, this is the kind of question that's going to generate a good discussion. Should Harry have just lied to Dobby here? If you were Harry, what would you do when Dobby's starting to make a scene and he's about to get you into trouble? What do you think Harry should have done? Should he have lied? Should he have tried something else? I'm going to continue reading on page 23. No, said Harry angrily. Give me my friend's letters. Then Harry Potter leaves Dobby no choice, said the elf sadly. Before Harry could move, Dobby had darted to the bedroom door, pulled it open, and sprinted down the stairs. Mouth dry, stomach lurching, Harry sprang after him, trying not to make a sound. He jumped the last 6 steps, landing cat-like on the hall carpet, looking around for Dobby. From the dining room he heard Uncle Vernon saying, Tell Petunia that very funny story about those American plumbers, Mr. Mason. She's been dying to hear. Harry ran up the hall into the kitchen and felt his stomach disappear. Aunt Petunia's masterpiece of a pudding, the mountain of cream and sugared violets, was floating up near the ceiling. On top of a cupboard in the corner crouched Dobby. No! Croaked Harry. Please! They'll kill me! Harry Potter must say he's not going back to school. Dobby, please. Say it, sir. I can't. Dobby gave him a tragic look. Then Dobby must do it, sir, for Harry Potter's own good. The pudding fell to the floor with a heart-stopping crash. Cream splattered the windows and walls as the dish shattered. With a crack like a whip, Dobby vanished. There were screams from the dining room, and Uncle Vernon burst into the kitchen to find Harry rigid with shock, covered from head to foot in Aunt Petunia's pudding. At first, it looked as though Uncle Vernon would manage to gloss the whole thing over. Just our nephew, very disturbed. Meeting strangers upsets him, so we kept him upstairs. He shooed the shocked Masons back into the dining room, promised Harry he would flay him within an inch of his own life when the Masons had left, and handed him a mop. Aunt Petunia dug some ice cream out of the freezer, and Harry, still shaking, started scrubbing the kitchen clean. Uncle Vernon might still have been able to make his deal if it hadn't had been for the owl. Aunt Petunia was just passing around a box of after-dinner mints when a huge barn owl swooped through the dining room window, dropped a letter on Mrs. Mason's head, and swooped out again. Mrs. Mason screamed like a banshee and ran from the house, shouting about lunatics. Can you imagine? A giant owl flies in and drops a letter on your head and then flies out. Mr. Mason stayed just long enough to tell the Dursleys that his wife was mortally afraid of birds of all shapes and sizes, and to ask whether this was their idea of a joke. Harry stood in the kitchen, clutching the mop for support, as Uncle Vernon advanced on him, a demonic glint in his tiny eyes. Clearly, Uncle Vernon did not make that deal for those drills. Read it! He hissed heavily, evilly, brandishing the letter the owl had delivered. Go on! Read it! Harry took it. It did not contain birthday greetings. Dear Mr. Potter, We have received intelligence that a hover charm was used at your place of residence this evening at 12 minutes past 9. As you know, underage wizards are not permitted to perform spells outside school, and further spell work on your part may lead to expulsion from said school. Decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery, 1875, paragraph C. We would also ask that you remember that any magical activity that risks notice by members of the non-magical community, Muggles, is a serious offense under Section 13 of the International Confederation of Warlocks Statute of Secrecy. Enjoy your holidays. Yours sincerely, Mafalda Hopkirk. Improper use of magic office, Ministry of Magic. Harry looked up from the letter and gulped. You didn't tell us you weren't allowed to use magic outside school, said Uncle Vernon, a mad gleam dancing in his eyes. Forgot to mention it? Slipped your mind, I dare say? He was bearing down on Harry like a great bulldog, all his teeth bared. Well, I've got news for you, boy. I'm locking you up. You're never going back to that school. Never. And if you try and magic yourself out, they'll expel you. And laughing like a maniac, he dragged Harry back upstairs. Okay, this, once again, is a good time for us all to stop, write down a bullet or two, or depending on what kind of note-taking strategy you are, adding a detail to our web, or writing a question in your Cornell notes. You can see here in my notes, I can all the way down here towards the bottom. I'll just pull that off right now. Here, where the Ministry of Magic thinks that Dobby's hover charm was cast by Harry, and so now the Dursleys know that Harry isn't allowed to do magic outside of school. I know that those notes are very small and you can't read them, but you should be writing your own notes anyway. My notes are simply here to show you, again, as an example. We don't just try to do our notes at the end. As we're reading, we stop, we think about what we've read, we take some time to jot it down. Again, if I'm using bullets, I'm being much more literal. I'm specifically trying to jot down, this is what happened. Alright, later on, I'm going to try to pull out what's the most important information that I would include in a summary. Alright, page 27. Uncle Vernon was as bad as his word. The following morning, he paid a man to fit bars on Harry's window. He himself fitted a cat flap in the bedroom door so that small amounts of food could be pushed inside 3 times a day. They let Harry out to use the bathroom morning and evening. Otherwise, he was locked in his room around the clock. Wow, this is really like an animal. He's got bars on his windows like he's in a cage. He's locked in his room. He's fed through a cat flap door like perhaps an animal in the zoo. And they let him out twice a day. Again, like he's a dog or something. And remember, this all happened right on his birthday, and these are the days following Harry's 12th birthday. 3 days later, the Dursleys were showing no sign of relenting, and Harry couldn't see any way out of his situation. He lay on his bed watching the sun sinking behind the bars on the window and wondered miserably what was going to happen to him. And think about it. He can't do magic because he'll get expelled. He can't leave his room. He's locked in. He's got no way to get back to Hogwarts. It's the middle of the summertime. And basically the people who, they're not his parents, but they act like his mom and dad because these are the people that he's been left to live with since his own mom and dad are dead. And this is how they're treating him. Things really are very dark for Harry in the beginning of the Chamber of Secrets. He literally is locked in his room, not allowed to go back to school, being treated like an animal. What was the good of magicking himself out of his room if Hogwarts would expel him for doing it? Yet life at Privy Drive had reached an all-time low. Now that the Dursleys knew that they weren't going to wake up as fruit bats, he had lost his only weapon. Dobby might have saved Harry from horrible happenings at Hogwarts, but the way things were going, he'd probably starve to death anyway. The cat flap rattled and Aunt Petunia's hand appeared, pushing a bowl of canned soup into the room. Harry, whose insides were aching with hunger, jumped off of his bed and seized it. The soup was stone cold, but he drank half of it in one gulp. Then he crossed the room to Hedwig's cage and tipped the soggy vegetables at the bottom of the bowl into her empty food tray. She ruffled her feathers and gave him a look of deep disgust. "It's no good turning your beak up at it. That's all we've got," said Harry grimly. He put the empty bowl back on the floor next to the cat flap and lay back down on the bed, somehow even hungrier than he had been before the soup. Supposing he was still alive in another 4 weeks, what would happen if he didn't turn up at Hogwarts? Would someone be sent to see why he hadn't come back? Would they be able to make the Dursleys let him go? The room was growing dark. Exhausted, stomach rumbling, mind spinning over the same unanswerable questions, Harry fell into an uneasy sleep. Again, I'm feeling very bad for Harry here. Again, I really, it's hard to imagine being locked in your room, not being let out. This is extreme conditions that the Dursleys are putting Harry in. So it's right in the middle of the summertime, and things just really can't get much darker for Harry. And he falls into an uneasy sleep. He dreamed that he was on a show in a zoo, with a card reading "Underage Wizard" attached to his cage. He even dreams that he's in a zoo, as an animal in the zoo. That's what he's dreaming of. People goggled through the bars at him as he lay, starving and weak on a bed of straw. He saw Dobby's face in the crowd and shouted out, asking for help. But Dobby called, "Harry Potter is safe there, sir," and vanished. Then the Dursleys appeared and Dudley rattled the bars of the cage, laughing at him. "Stop it," Harry muttered as the rattling pounded in his sore head. "Leave me alone. Cut it out. I'm trying to sleep." Remember, this is a dream that he just had there at the end. He opened his eyes. Moonlight was shining through the bars on the window, and someone was goggling through the bars at him. A freckle-faced, red-haired, long-nosed someone. Ron Weasley was outside Harry's window. Again, J.K. Rowling does kind of the same thing at the end of Chapter 2 as she does at the end of Chapter 1. It's not until the very last page, the very last few sentences, that she reveals something is on Harry's bed. And then that something drives this entire chapter. This entire chapter is all about Harry and Dobby and we'll call it the Dobby incident and what happened as a result. And here she's doing it again with Ron being at the window. Ron really has not been mentioned much throughout this entire chapter, aside from the fact that Dobby was holding on to his letters. But then here she leaves us on this kind of a cliffhanger moment at the end of the chapter where things could not look darker for Harry. But all of a sudden he wakes up from a bad dream and he realizes Ron Weasley is outside of Harry's window. So, and that's what's going to drive our next chapter, Chapter 3, which is called The Burrow. So now that we're done with Chapter 2, again, this is part where I really, with the video, I can't engage you guys in a discussion, but I do have some discussion questions. And, you know, if you have friends around, these are things that you should be thinking about, you could be thinking about, and these were just some things that I wrote down for this chapter. The first discussion question that you might think about at home is, can you describe Dobby? Just being able to describe Dobby. He's a central character in this chapter. And then, really, why is Dobby visiting Harry? These are like level 1 questions. Why is Dobby visiting Harry? There's one answer right in the text. Would you listen to Dobby? Now, this, of course, is a level 2 question. This is if you were Harry, would you listen to Dobby? I'm putting you in the book. And so, again, take some time. Think about that. Would you just listen to Dobby and not go back to Hogwarts? Or would you be like Harry? How would you deal with Dobby? And that's what these next 3 questions are. This is really kind of the same question, but I wrote it in 3 different ways. And you can see, so they would all generate the same kind of conversation, but it's just showing you different ways of wording it. What would you do about Dobby if he was in your room? What do you think Harry should do about Dobby? What do you think of the way that Harry handled Dobby? So it's all addressing the same issue, but it's a slightly different conversation. All right, the first one we're saying, what would you do if you were Dobby, or if you were Harry? The second one is, what do you think Harry should do? And then the last one is, what do you think of the way Harry handled it? Did Harry handle it the right way? And then take some time, describe what happens to Harry after the Dobby incident. This is where I was stopping all the time, saying that things are looking very dark for Harry. And lastly, at the end of the chapter, before Ron shows up, what do you think Harry should have done in that situation? You know, when Harry is feeling hopeless, before we ever get to that last line of chapter 2, and Harry sees Ron outside of his window, if that was you, what would you say to Harry? What should Harry do in that situation? Okay, all things that you guys can think about after reading chapter 2. So now that we're done, and now everybody at home should have a set of notes completed, your only homework assignment is to go over to the Classworks tab, come down here to the chapter 2 notes, and make sure that you upload your picture. You can see here, chapter 2 notes. The directions tell you read chapter 2 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets and complete a note-taking strategy of your choice. Choose what type of notes you would like to do from page 42. Be sure that on the top of your notes you include the date, page number, and title of the chapter, just like my example from chapter 1 and the one I just showed you. Make sure that your notes are detailed and include information from the beginning, middle, and end of the chapter. Upload a picture of your notes here so I can see that you got them done. Write neatly and make sure I can see all your notes clearly. So that's what you need to do, all right? Just simply make sure you take a good clean picture of your notebook page, upload that so I can give you guys credit for getting your chapter 2 notes done. Tomorrow, we're going to use those notes and we are going to be doing our chapter 2 quiz, and we will do the chapter 2 60-second summary challenge. So until tomorrow, guys, have a good one. Bye-bye.